is whiter than snow. Faithful love calms each fear, reaches down, dries each tear, holds my hand when I can't stand on my own. Faithful love, from above, came to earth to show the Father's love. And I'll never be the same, for I've seen faithful love face to face, and Jesus is his name. Faithful love is a friend just when hope seems to end. Welcome face, sweet embrace, tender touch filled with grace. Faithful love, endless power, living flame, Spirit's fire, burning bright in the night, guiding my way. Faithful love, from above, came to earth to show the Father's love. And I'll never be the same, for I've seen faithful love face to face, and Jesus is his name. Wonderful, so wonderful is your unfailing love. Your cross has spoken mercy over me, over me. No eye has seen, no ear has heard, no heart could fully know how glorious, how beautiful you are. Beautiful one I love, beautiful one I adore, beautiful one my soul must sing. Powerful, so powerful, your glory fills the skies, your mighty works displayed for all to see, all to see. The beauty of your majesty awakes my heart to sing. How marvelous, how wonderful you are. Beautiful one I love, beautiful one I adore, beautiful one my soul must sing. Beautiful one I love, beautiful one I adore, beautiful one my soul must sing. You opened my eyes to your wonders anew. You captured my heart with this love, 'cause nothing on earth is as beautiful as you. You opened my eyes to your wonders anew. You captured my heart with this love, 'cause nothing on earth is as beautiful as you. Beautiful one I love, beautiful one I adore, beautiful one my soul must sing. Beautiful one I love, beautiful one I adore, beautiful one my soul
Good morning, ladies, and welcome to our midweek Bible study. Before I get into the study for the week, we will be taking the next 3 weeks off, and we will resume on January the 13th. So anybody who is tuning in at home, we won't have it for the next 3 weeks. There just won't be anything posted on Thursdays. So we are working through the book Bind Us Together by Dorita McDaniel. And we have made it all the way to chapter 7, y'all. I'm so proud of us. So today we are going to start in chapter 7. Yes. Oh, did you have a question?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay. I'm getting confused already this morning, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open us in prayer. So if everybody will bow their heads. Father God, we come before you this morning, and we are so thankful for this time that we have, for this Bible class that meets here, for the congregation that meets here at Collinsville. We're thankful for our elders that oversee our congregation. We're thankful for all of our brothers and sisters that are here, that want to worship you in spirit and in truth. We are so thankful for Christian sisters, for friendships, for what that means. We are thankful that even no matter what kind of family that we come from, with our biological families, we are thankful that we have our church family. And so every single one of us in this room can proclaim to be a part of a family. We are so thankful for your Son dying on the cross for our sins, and we're thankful for this book where we are going to be talking this morning about opening our mouths. In Jesus' name, amen. So this chapter is called Open Your Mouth. The last one, remember, we talked about stretch out your hands. So today we're going to talk about what it means to open your mouth. Now this chapter is very funny because I always highlight what I want to talk about, and the whole chapter is highlighted. A lot of times there, in some of the previous chapters, I might have 3 sentences on a page, but this one, it's like every paragraph has something highlighted in it. So I love the verse that she started the chapter with. Therefore, encourage one another and build one another up just as you are doing. 1 Thessalonians 5:11. So I tell my kids all the time, there are only 2 options with our words. We are either building up or we are tearing down. There is no middle ground. You can't possibly do a neutral thing with your words. Because if your words are so neutral that they're good, then you're building up. You're helping to build that person up. And if you are not doing that, then you are tearing down. So if we want to do the right thing, then we have to be building up. So we have to make sure that our words actually count. So she says here, maybe you never meet a stranger, or maybe you freeze in social climates. Either way, you'll benefit from the information in this chapter. We're on page 97, and I loved this pyramid at the bottom. I just thought this was so good. This is from John Powell. I actually really want to find this book now because I liked the pyramid so well. I was like, I want to see what else he had to say. The book is Why Am I Afraid to Tell You Who I Am? So he created this pyramid, and there are 5 levels of communication. The very bottom of the pyramid is the lowest, most basic level of communication, and the very top of the pyramid is the most intimate, most real, authentic, genuine conversation. I would wager that most people don't ever go past level 3. If you're looking there at what these levels are, I think that a lot of people in a lot of relationships don't make it past those. So at the very bottom we have cliche conversation, which we're going to talk about these in a minute. Then the second level up is just reporting facts to others. A lot of people stop right there, don't they? It's just nothing but just sharing information. The third level up is my ideas and judgments. The fourth level up is my feelings. A lot of people kind of don't make it to that level. They don't discuss their feelings. And then the very top level is peak communication. There are some relationships that ideally, done God's way, we would reach all the way to that top. We'd be standing at the top of that pyramid, having that kind of conversation with that kind of intimacy, closeness. But again, I don't think that very many people realize that, even in relationships where they should, because it's hard to think that if we had marriages with peak communications happening, that we would have so many issues sometimes in marriages.
I was just thinking, I have that with Jay.
Yeah, yeah.
I can say I have it.
And it's a huge
Yeah,
blessing
yeah.
when you do have that. And it takes work on both parts, right? I mean, you if you're going to have peak communication, then that means that you talk about things in a certain way, and it means the other also talk in that certain way. So I think that we can see, when I was seeing this pyramid, I was thinking about the actual conversations that we see Jesus having. And I thought, you know what? He is all the way at the top of peak communication every time. And I was thinking specifically, I don't know why this one popped into my head, but after Peter has denied Jesus and Jesus is asking him, feed my sheep, I thought that is peak communication at its very highest level. And it just made me think that if we have that example, we know how to do it, because we can see, even if we've never seen a real person in our lives do it, we have this that tells us how. And so if we do that, then we can have the kind of conversation that I think that we were created to have, right? No one would argue that people need other people and people need connection. And it's no mistake, I think, that people need conversation, right? If you read any marriage book anywhere, that's going to make the list. That conversation is going to be something that's a need, especially for the woman usually in the list, but it's in the man's list as well, because you have to talk to the person that you're married to. And we all need that kind of thing. And with our relationships with friendships, people in the world who feel the most supported and the most loved and things, they have these kind of friendships where they talk in this kind of way. So when we first meet someone and we have a conversation with them, first of all, I wanted to define what a conversation is, because I think a lot of times we benefit by breaking down a word. Obviously, we all know what conversations are, but I wanted to really look it up and see. So a conversation is any informal talk between two or more where news and ideas are exchanged. So it has to be between, so both parties have to be talking, right? This isn't like because right now I'm teaching and instructing, so I'm talking a lot and everyone's listening, but that's not really a conversation. It's not to say we can't have conversation while we're doing this class, but I'm not exactly illustrating good conversation right now. But we know that to have those ideas and that news exchange, that's what a conversation is. When we have in the past, written letters, conversation happening on paper, emails, conversation happening that you typed. And I think when done correctly, text messaging, conversations happening back and forth. I know that Jonathan and I have conversations in text messages, so I know some people probably don't use it. They kind of stick to the more cliche things, but you can have a real conversation back and forth. So cliche conversation, she says we meet someone, we run into them, and what do we say? How are you? I like your dress. It is good to see you. How about those Yankees? Sure is hot, isn't it? All of these things, that's what we talk about. People talk about the weather, and they talk about what somebody else is wearing, and they say, how are you? But they don't practice the pause, and they don't wait to hear how someone actually is. There is nothing threatening, nothing intrusive about these conversations. Everyone is safe, but everyone is also unconnected. Nothing has just happened. Those words, they didn't actually have a conversation. There was no exchange of information, no exchange of ideas. So she says you can use that cliche conversation to be able to make a real connection. How are you? And then you wait to actually hear the answer. You make eye contact. I like your dress, but be genuine. Why do you like the dress? Is it the color? Does the color make her eyes look really nice? Is it the fact that you appreciate the fact that she's dressed in a modest way when people don't dress modestly? Like, say something that's real instead of just, I like your dress. Eye contact implies a level of acceptance. Now, I would caution, only because where we have boys on the autism spectrum, that you can have conversations with eye contact not happening too. Eye contact is harder, especially for one of our boys, and it does not mean that he's not listening to you. So I do agree that eye contact can be a good thing, but I also think I would caution people to say that it is not necessarily a thing that has to be occurring, as long as that real conversation is still occurring. Connection can't happen if you're not accepting the other person. So I looked up, what does the word accept mean? When you accept something, then you are consenting to receive something. You are saying, yes, I will take this thing. You think about when the mail is delivered and you sign for a letter, you are signing to accept it and hold on to it. It's your letter then. You are believing or recognizing a thing as valid, as correct. So when we accept another person, we are literally receiving them into our lives. We are telling them, you are good, you belong in my life, and you mean something to me. You have value, and I know that that is something, and that is a big thing to tell someone else. There are not a lot of accepting people going around today. We turn on the news and we can see that sometimes there's no acceptance happening in a room. It doesn't take very long looking at teenagers today to realize that acceptance is something that's very needed and oftentimes not found. We can see that very well by looking at the mental health statistics for teenagers today. So we need to make sure, though, that we are people that are accepting. And she said, just calling the person by name initiates a connection. And I loved what she said here. She had a whole story about being a missionary in South Africa. And she said they have a saying in South Africa, and I loved this saying, she is the cat's mother. Well, of course, everybody would be like, who? Which cat is the cat's mother? Don't use pronouns, use names, because that's how you know. And so call people by their name. She said, I heard my name more times in the first few weeks of our 6 years than I had ever heard in my entire life. And that is so true. You can literally sit in a teacher's classroom all year long and maybe never hear your name. If it's a teacher that does roll without actually calling it, your teacher may never, ever once refer to you by your name, especially at the secondary level. You get to like high school and college level. And that is, it can make you feel invisible, right? People can. And there's a reason that we talked about this just a few weeks ago, about the name being so valuable and what it means to have your name. So she said sometimes simply calling a student's name can restore order to a classroom. All you have to do is speak that person's name. When a person is named, he or she knows that they are visible, that they are recognized as a separate person. So that's a really good thing, and we can do that for other people because it's not hard to say someone's name. And there are a lot of people who don't hear it. If you think about people, even if you watch sometimes Interaction, I know we talk about our family and people that we love at nursing homes sometimes. There are some amazing caregivers at nursing homes. There are some great nurses. There are some great staff that do things, that organize crafts and things for them. But there are also some people working there sometimes that aren't great. And I know that you don't have to be standing in a nursing home for very long sometimes to realize no one's saying their name. No one's asking how they are and waiting for that pause. No one is checking to make sure how they are feeling that day. No one's seeing if their family has called lately or if their family member has come to visit. And that's just one example of a place that I can think of where maybe someone doesn't get to hear their name as frequently as they should. And we can make sure that we are people that do have that acceptance, that do use another person's name. So the next level of conversation is reporting facts. When you share generally known facts, you reveal almost nothing about yourself, and you invite nothing from others. You just pass information along. You're on chapter 5. The next ball game is next Monday. That's it. And that's where a lot of people's information goes. How many people have been in the workplace and had a boss, and that is where the conversation ends? Because there's nothing that says that a boss can't be a good boss and actually interact with people some too. I had a really great manager at one point at Allstate, and she knew everything about everybody. She would ask about how trips were because she actually knew where people went. And she didn't have time. She was very busy. She didn't have time to sit around and talk all day. But she knew enough to say, was your trip to the beach relaxing? Did you have safe travels? Was everything good on your way down? You know, things like that. And she would get little tidbits, even though she was so busy. And this was a person that was a department manager. So she had, I don't even know how many hundreds of people under her, but maybe 200, 250. And she still knew these things because it was her nature to ask little things. You weren't here all last week. I noticed that. Were you sick or were you on a trip or something? And she would just take just a couple minutes, and then she would still do the work, you know. But she was really good at that. And as a result of that, what do you think happened when she came around and asked people, I need you to do this thing, this hard thing. Can you do this hard thing? People were like, yes, of course I can, no problem. Because she had developed connections. And they were much more inclined. And do you think, too, that anybody was particularly worried when they saw this manager walking by? Nobody was thinking, oh, I better take off my headphones, because we all had desk jobs, and a lot of people would listen to their music while they were working. And when some managers came and be like, I gotta take that off so I can make sure, but nobody did with her. They'd wait. She'd tap them if she needed something. And so she did not stay at the reporting facts category. She certainly made it to the sharing ideas and judgment category, if nothing else. So it is possible, no matter what your relationship with somebody else is. And you'll notice, I know I've talked to lots of friends as I was looking at this chapter. I have friends that are nurses. There are doctors that stop at reporting facts when they work with them. But there are doctors that get all the way up here to peak conversation too. And that makes a big difference between how people work with one another. And there are just anything that you could name like that. I think you could name any relationship, and there's a way for it to be like this. Jonathan and I were talking as I was kind of looking at this chapter, we were talking about the difference between how retail used to be compared to how it is now. Right before retail, people had their list of contacts, and they weren't just trying to get a sale, though they knew those people. They knew, I know that he's been needing a new suit and he's been waiting for this sale. I'm going to get something right in the mail and let him know on this postcard that they are finally on sale. Or they knew, you know, just their sizes and their things that they wore, and they were detail oriented and they took care of them. And we were talking, because Jonathan and I both worked in retail, and when we first started in high school, it was still early enough that we still had like alterations departments and things. And you would take somebody down and they would stand there and they would get pinned and their pants would be hemmed. They would leave with something that, though it was mass produced, fit them like it wasn't. And that just all ended, right? And it's not the kind of connection we receive now. People order online, doesn't work, put the sticker back on it, send it back. But it's a different kind of feeling when you had that kind of retail where people actually knew. When I worked in my departments, I knew the moms who shopped with me because I worked in the teenage girls department. I mean, I knew everything about what their girls like to wear and what their favorite colors were and what they, you know what I mean? And I knew those moms, if they had nieces that they shopped for, I knew that and their ages and what they liked to wear. And it was a big difference. Like, it was totally different than just standing and ringing up the register, because that's the kind of service that people once expected. It's the same, right? When people used to take their car, we talked about that not that long ago. You would go to the filling station, and what did someone do? They checked your levels of your oil for you. They checked your tires. They would take care of you. Now you pump your own gas, and you have to check your own levels and things, and that's just a different world. And I think that part of the problem is that it used to be that people did have that kind of connection. They just lived life very differently than we do now. And so we have to try a little bit harder to make sure that we don't stall out on one of these low levels. But she said, if you stop at the reporting facts, then you remain adjacent. There is a word for early childhood teachers, and it's called adjacent play. When you have little toddlers and preschoolers, they generally, by later preschool, they play together, but by 3-year-olds, they are still playing adjacently. They're playing in the housekeeping section together, but one child's playing this and one child's playing that. Now, they're happy to be near each other, but they don't care about interacting with each other yet. As they get a little bit bigger, then they'll start role playing. I'll be the cook and I'll bring you your food. But when they're very little, they don't play like that. And so they may, with parents and things, you know, you can play with a child. I'm not saying you can't play with a littler child, but if you pay attention in a classroom situation, they generally don't play with each other so much. And they're adjacent. They're beside each other, but they're not connected. If you ask a 2-year-old who their best friend is, they're going to name somebody like their mommy or their daddy. They're not going to try to tell you somebody's name in their class. If you ask a 5-year-old, they're going to name that little friend that they talk to and spend all their time with. But we want to not be adjacent. We don't want to just be beside other people but not connected. We want to actually be connected. So she says here, how do you move on from just fact reporting? And she gives one example here. Instead of saying, hey, Monday nights for the master is tomorrow at 7. That is, if anybody hasn't heard of that, that's a thing where you get together and do like service projects as a congregation. And so you will work on different things. And usually it's stuff like, you might do what we're doing, like putting together the things for shut-ins, and then everybody that night might go and take and drop one off somewhere. So a lot of congregations have that. And she said, instead of just saying it, you could invite her to attend. You could say, I'll be glad to pick you up. Could I pick you up at 7? Or I'll wait for you at the front door. I'll save you a seat over at my table. So then you're making her feel wanted and included. You're not just passing along the information. The next level is sharing ideas and judgment. Do you have trouble trusting others? A lot of people have a lot of trouble trusting others. So I looked up trust. Trust is a firm belief in the reliability, the truth, the ability, and the strength of someone else. That is a big thing to ask, a big thing to have, because we're talking about a firm, unshakable, absolute belief that this person is going to be those things for you, that you can rely on them, that they are always honest and true with you, that their relationship to you means what they say it does. You're trusting in their strength when you're weak. You're trusting in their ability to be there, to be your friend, to be there for you. That's a big thing to do. And she says, when we start to think about trusting others, we test the waters a little, don't we? We share a little bit about an idea, a little bit about a judgment we have. But then if that person is raising their eyebrows or narrowing their eyes at us, if they're looking at their watch or yawning, then we're going to retreat. We're going to pull back to safer ground. We're going to just go silent, or we're going to change the subject. We're not safe here, so we're going to put up our guard again and make sure that we don't get hurt. That's what the lack of trust is going to do. But if that person remains interested in what we've said, and then they share a thing about themselves, then trust starts to develop, right? You go back and go forth, and you both are sharing with each other, and that's when a bond is going to start to form. So she defines these words here for us. Judgment is the ability to make decisions or form opinions by discerning and by evaluating. And to discern means to perceive something hidden or obscure, or to perceive differences. When I trust you, then I can begin to share feelings that lie under my ideas. Because why do we have the ideas that we have? Why do we think what we think? I mean, most people don't do that in a vacuum. Generally speaking, there's some kind of feeling that's attached to what we are believing as far as our judgments and our convictions. And so she said a judgment, here's an example. I think our president is doing a good job, or I think our president is doing a bad job. Those are judgments. And then for feelings, we're talking about things like, I'm jealous of this. I am feeling ill at ease. I don't feel comfortable here. I am proud to be your friend. Things like that. Those are our feelings. So that's that next level, that feelings level. And a lot of people don't do that, do they? They don't share those judgments. They're not going to say what they think about how something is going. They're not going to say, definitely not going to say how they feel. I mean, there are people that you can know for years and years and years, and you don't know how they feel in a situation a lot of times. So it's a little bit more dangerous of a level, because you do have to have that trust, because they're going to react somehow to what it is that you've said. And then the very, very top level is that peak communication. And I really liked how he did the pyramid, but if you think about a mountain peak and you think about mountain climbers, right, climbing is hard work. If you've never been mountain climbing, which I haven't, but I've read a lot about it, you have to have a lot of gear with you, right? You don't just go in your tennis shoes and go hiking up the mountain. If you're hiking a real mountain like the Himalayas, I mean, you are going to need a lot of gear, because depending on how high you're going, you may even need an oxygen tank with you to be able to breathe when you get to the certain summit. And so you have to have these things. You have to be prepared. You don't just show up and just start walking. And that's kind of how relationships in life are for us. We have to be prepared. We have to have these different tools and these different things that we're going to use, but then we have to do the work. We have to actually make the climb. And sometimes, if you've ever watched any kind of mountain climbing show, they've got like their picks and they're putting them in, and sometimes they have to get out their, I don't know what you call it, their rope thing, and they're going to have to rappel up for a few minutes. They've got a lot of things that they have to do, and that is exactly what relationships are for us. Relationships are not built without some hard work on your part. It might be an easy relationship. It's not to say that making that friendship is like so hard that you couldn't have done it, but you still have to work, because you have to work at doing all those things, at sharing your feelings and talking and being honest and being open. And you have to accept what the other person's feelings are and things, and you have to go back and forth. If you have difficulty connecting, now to connect means to bring together in contact so that a real link is established. And when I thought of that, I thought about that clasp on that necklace where you put the links together. And what happens when you do that? The necklace stays put. It doesn't fall off. It's not going to move. If you don't clasp the necklace, then what happens? If you go to put it around your neck, it's going to fall every time. You don't have a real connection. You don't have the contact that's there to keep the thing in place. So when we don't do this, when we don't form connections with other people, then we don't have the thing that's keeping us to the group. We don't have anything that's binding us with that other person. We don't have anything real. She says if we have relationships, we have one of two things. We either have a superficial relationship that's very shallow, or we have a real one. And if we have a real one, then again, we've had to do all of these things. We've had to prove ourselves to be trustworthy. We've had to take risks. We've had to share ourselves. We have had to look and see how alike we are, but we've also had to see, oh, we're different too, but our differences complement each other. And when that happens, then we have that potential of sharing the peak communication. And I loved what she said. Peak communication is not a permanent experience. It can occur in moments of mutual empathy. We don't have to be with someone forever to have peak communication. I have heard from people in many different situations, but one that was on my mind this week, we have friends that in the tornadoes the last year that went through Nashville and Cookeville lost their home. Their home was just completely destroyed, and they were injured, but they were okay, and they spent the year rebuilding their house. Well, they have boys that are 11 and 14, and they've had a really hard time with everything that's happened in Mayfield and all of the other places, because it's triggering them, it's traumatizing, it's reminding them. And so she has said, her one boy especially felt really bad about feeling bad because he doesn't want to just go to his room and go to sleep, but he's like, oh, I'm a teenager. But she has assured him that it's fine. She's like, when people have lived through a traumatic experience, it's perfectly okay for your mother to come in and sit and chat with you for a little while, no problems. But he's felt embarrassed and everything. But then he told her, because he knows that she's on Facebook, he's like, actually, Mom, I think I want you to just share how I've been feeling, because there's bound to be somebody else that's feeling the same way. And he's like, I don't mind. I'm not too embarrassed to say that I felt this way, and maybe it can help someone else. And she's like, oh, we're doing a good job raising our boy. But she said that that was so brave of him to put himself out there, knowing that she has all these people, that some of them are like at church with them in different places. He's going to run into people who have read this. And she did preface it, of course, with, don't talk to him about it, let's don't embarrass him further. He's tried to do this really good thing. But he knows that they know. And he did that because he wanted other people in similar situations to realize that it's okay to reach out and ask for help, even if you are a 14, almost 15-year-old boy. And so she was saying that she was on some board, some mom group that she was in where somebody else had lost their home. She's been talking to that person this week. Doesn't know her at all, total strangers. But she's been, well, it's going to be a lot of work. You're going to have to work with the insurance company and the contractor, all these things. But she's been encouraging someone else. They are having peak communication, even though they've never met, because they have that connection of losing their homes in the tornado. And I think that we can keep that in mind. Sometimes you kind of skip some of these other steps, right? They didn't do cliche communication at all. But they went straight to sharing ideas and judgments and feelings and talking. So I think it's important to remember that sometimes you don't necessarily work through the peak, depending on what thing is that you're connecting by. You might make it right to peak communication. So I loved this quote she had here. This was something she said that she found on Pinterest. Victoria Erickson said, and this is kind of a long quote, "When connections are real, they simply never die. They can be buried or ignored or walked away from, but never broken. If you've deeply resonated with another person or a place, the connections remain despite any distance, time, situation, lack of presence, or circumstance. If you're doubtful, then just try it. Revisit a person or a place and see if there's any sense at all of the space between now and then. If it was truly real, you'll be instantly swept back into the moment that it was before it left. During the same year and place, with the same wonder and hope and comfort and heartbeat, real connections live on forever. And I thought about that in my own life because I was trying to think, is that true? did that actually happen like she said? And I thought, it did, because I have a lot of friends from high school and college both. We don't really keep in touch now. I am friends with some of them on Facebook, so, we might happy birthday each other, but it's not a real connection anymore. That's not to say I don't know anything, because if they post regularly, I know some things that are going on in their lives, and they know some things that are going on in my life. But it's not the same as it was. We're not getting together. We're not spending all of this time. But I do feel the same about those people. I mean, certainly if one of them was to reach out and call, I would have time to talk. And so I thought that is how that works. That's really neat, because there are people and there are places that are very special, and you feel that same feeling when you even though all this time has lapsed. And so I thought that was a really good quote. And I think that some connections, obviously, we have to be more careful with. If you're in a marriage, I hope you're being a little bit more careful not letting the connection die. But in other instances, things happen and life happens and people get busy. They get married, they have children, and so the relationship changes. There's time and there's distance. You're not close to the people, geographically you're not close. And it's the same like with our people that we loved at MSOP. We're not close to any of them because they've all taken jobs in other states and they're all very far away. But we love all of them still. And so I thought this is a really good quote. Those connections, those resonations that were there are still there. So she says we need to learn to encourage. And we talked about it a couple of weeks ago. When we encourage someone, we are literally putting courage into them. We are giving them support, confidence, and hope. And that is a big thing. People throw around, I think, the word encouragement very lightly and very loosely in our country. But encouragement means so much more than what we mean. When people say, oh, be encouraging, they usually mean something a little bit more shallow than what the word actually means. Support. When we support something, we bear the weight of it. We literally keep it upright. If you think about that support of a foundation, it is keeping the house from falling. If not for foundation, then every time that it rained, houses would get washed away. That does happen in places where they don't build on foundations. So that foundation, that support, that bearing that weight is important. So when we think about encouraging, we are literally bearing the weight of the problems of the person that we love. We are helping to keep them upright. We are giving them the strength to stand up and get up that morning and do their day. When we give them confidence, we give them the belief that they can rely on us. We live in a country that values relying only on yourself. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, get the job done. And that can be fine, right? We have to obviously have our own initiative. We have to have drive and motivation and focus and do things. We're not excused from the hard labor that has to go behind things. But we also need to rely on other people, right? We need to have people that are close to us. When we give someone hope, hope means to want something to happen or be true, or to desire with expectation of a fulfillment. So when we talk about the hope of heaven, we expect that we are going to heaven because the Bible says so. If we have been faithful and obedient, then we have that expectation of what is going to happen. But when we give someone else hope, we are giving them an expectation that they can trust us and rely on us. So it is not a light job to give someone encouragement, and it's not a job that we should take lightly. We have to take it seriously and really think about what it means to give someone that encouragement. We always talk about Barnabas the Encourager. I liked this quote she had here on page 101 by Oscar Wilde. Anybody can sympathize with the sufferings of a friend, but it requires a very fine nature to sympathize with a friend's successes. How true can that be sometimes? I think sometimes people, I'm not sure I agree with him that anybody can sympathize with the sufferings, because some people aren't even good at that. But when we sympathize with someone's successes, when they won and we didn't, when they got the thing and we didn't, then it can be much, much harder. And it can be, it takes a lot to be able to do that. I have a friend that I was talking to not that long ago, and she and her husband aren't able to have any children. She has some health issues, and she just physically isn't able to bear a child. And it has always made them very sad. And she said that she and her husband decided, because they're Christians, they're in the church, they had decided long ago that they couldn't be bitter about it, that they had to still be happy for other people. And she's like, I cannot count the number of baby showers that I've sat at, and I've wanted to feel just jealous and unhappy while I've been sitting there because they're getting this thing that I so desperately want. Well, she said that she doesn't sew at all. This friend does not. But she learned to sew a very simple baby blanket, and every time that she's sewing, it's just strips, and it's only like maybe 8 of them because it's like a little baby-sized blanket. And she said that as she sews, she prays for that baby and for those parents and for her own reactions at the baby shower to be happy and joyful while she's there, and not to sit and feel depressed or sad or whatever. And so she's like, I don't even like to sew, but I figured that it would give me a long enough opportunity to have the right kind of prayer and the right kind of mindset. And that's what she's done to kind of address that. And I thought, what an encouraging friend. Like, what a friend to go and sit at all of these. And she's been, because she's about Jonathan and I's age, so she's had a lot of baby showers through the years. They're at a really large congregation, so sometimes she can have like one a month that she goes to. And she encourages that friend. She encourages that family. She goes and sees those new babies and takes that mom new food, that new mom food when the baby comes. And I thought that is such an attitude to emulate that friend has, that she's chosen to have, because it is a choice that she's made. So Acts 11:22-24 says, the report of this came to the ears of the church in Jerusalem, and they sent Barnabas to Antioch. When he came and saw the grace of God, he was glad, because that was the kind of man he was. And he exhorted them all to remain faithful to the Lord with steadfast purpose, for he was a good man, full of the Holy Spirit and of faith, and a great many people were added to the Lord. So don't we want to be the kind of man that Barnabas was, or the kind of woman? We want to be the kind of woman that are like the man that Barnabas was. We can have that steadfast purpose. We can have that faithfulness to God, and we can be the good encourager that helps the people in our lives. So she says here to read Ecclesiastes 3, verses 1-8. If you haven't in any recent time spent any time in the book of Ecclesiastes, I do not think that you could possibly read through this book and not be greatly, tremendously encouraged. This is Jonathan's favorite book in the Bible, and he has several different favorite verses here, but it is a book that is nothing but encouraging. And it's just so full of good reminders, of practical advice, of things for us to think of, and it's short. So if you haven't read it, I would say that is an excellent way to start your new year, by going through the book of Ecclesiastes and really spending a few times. I would say read a chapter a day, and it wouldn't take you but a couple of weeks to get through, and just kind of dwell on the chapter as you read it, by actually maybe pick your favorite verse and write it down and think about it throughout the day. and just go through it. But here in chapter 3, verse 1, it says, "To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heavens, a time to be born, and a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to kill, and a time to heal, a time to break down, a time to build up, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to get, and a time to lose, a time to keep, and a time to cast away, a time to rend, and a time to sow, a time to keep silence, and a time to speak, a time to love, and a time to hate, a time of war, and a time of peace." So just in that one little section, we can see several times where people would need encouragement, right? When they are mourning, when they are weeping, when it's that time for losing or that time for casting away. Those are going to be times when people need our encouragement, when people need to hear that somebody else is there for them, that somebody else cares and is thinking of them. In my Bible, I don't usually like Bible headings because a lot of times they're not very accurate, but the heading at the top of that chapter for me says the weary round of life, and I really like that heading. I think that's a very well done one. So she said, besides being an encourager, besides being like a Barnabas, we don't want to be a busybody. The verse here is 1 Timothy 5:13. Besides that, they learn to be idlers, going about from house to house, and not only idlers, but gossips and busybodies, saying what they should not. So if anybody ever tries to tell you gossip is just a small sin, I don't think that's what my Bible says. It lists it as a pretty big sin. If we're saying what we should not, then that, and of course we understand that there aren't levels of sin anyway, but you know how people try to categorize it and say, and a lot of people justify that one. I just was saying it was just such a good story. I'm just passing it along. It's the truth. You know, all the things people say to justify it. But that one part of the verse alone, saying what they should not. James had a lot to say, right, about our tongue and about our speech and about what we say. And we know that there are plenty of things that we should not say. We can't be encouragers if we're also people that are gossiping, if we're also sharing other people's news, if we're also telling about someone's misfortunes. The next thing she says is, do make right judgments. Do not judge by appearances, but judge with right judgment. John 7:24. And so we can see over and over when Jesus made right judgments. And he always had simple, logical explanations. He didn't base his judgments on gut feelings. He didn't base them on appearances. What does it look like? He based his judgments on evidence and facts. So in John 7, specifically, Jesus was speaking to the crowd, to the Jews that were listening, about their failure to obey the law. And the crowd said, "You have a demon." They attacked him instead of listening to what he was saying. And Jesus just responded with, "Of course I don't." You know, he didn't argue with them. He didn't try to get into a big conflict. He just, "I don't," and he moved on. So she says we need to consider how to increase our connections by using a higher level of communication, by being genuine. We need to wait for the answers to our cliche questions and draw the other person out, calling them by name. And we can do that. And like I said, we can do that everywhere we go. when you are just going around in your daily interactions with people, then you can do that. I think about a lot of times people over and over go to the same places, but they don't really stop to see the people that are right there. If you are somebody and you go to a doctor's appointment once a month, then you're in that office 12 times a year. And that's a lot of times for seeing one person that might be a receptionist checking you in. And you have a minute, even though you don't want to bother her while she's busy, you still have a minute to make a connection. And you have the ability to do that. And a lot of times it's as easy as, oh my goodness, your phone has been ringing so much and I've been hearing you every time I call. You're always so cheerful. I appreciate that. That's the way to start to make a connection with someone. And you never know what those connections can lead to. So we actually have a little bit left. So I think that I'm going to stop there and we'll talk about the Choose Your Adventure the next time, because I don't want to rush through that and try to get through it in 3 minutes when we don't have much time. But I hope that this morning has been encouraging. I hope that it has felt like something that we can all do and that we do want to get out there and make those connections. And the really wonderful thing that I thought about was that it doesn't really matter if you've never done it. If you have never made those kinds of connections, you can just start today and just do it differently than you've been doing it. And so that's a really encouraging thought, because not only should we encourage others, but we need to encourage ourselves. We have to be gentle and use kind words with ourselves too, and tell ourselves that we can do these things. So I hope that you ladies have a wonderful Christmas that are listening at home, and a wonderful New Year. And I will be back on January the 13th with the next lesson.
Over all the earth you reign on high, every mountain stream, every sunset sky. But my one request, Lord, my only aim, is that you'd reign in me again. Lord, reign in me, reign in your power over all my dreams. In my darkest hour, you are the Lord of all I am. So won't you reign in me again? Over every thought, over every word, may my life reflect the beauty of my Lord. 'Cause you mean more to me than any earthly thing. So won't you reign in me again? Lord, reign in me, reign in your power over all my dreams. In my darkest hour, you are the Lord of all I am. So won't you reign in me again? Lord, reign in me, reign in your power over all my dreams. In my darkest hour, you are the Lord of all I am. So won't you reign in me again? You are the Lord